Welcome to another episode of what I call Patriotic Pulpit. I am Bill Lockwood. We've discussed things regarding the Roman Catholic Church, and I wanted to go back to a particular episode that I had regarding the worship of images, and I want to add to that particular episode at this time because many people have written into the program, and I'm happy for you to do so. But I'm pointing out that Roman Catholicism involves itself in bold-faced idolatry. Now, I do not say this to be ugly. I know that the Pope has just died this last week, and I love people who are Roman Catholics. I want to save them, but they are following a false religion. And one of the areas that the falsity stands out so clearly is the fact that they are in the worshiping of images and really idolatry. So in this particular podcast, I'm going to look at the following particular points. Number one, the Roman Catholic Church itself uses the word worship regarding the images. Roman Catholic authorities themselves, I say that because sometimes people write to me and say, we venerate, we adore, but we don't worship, and we're making a big distinction as if everybody's going to understand the distinction. Those distinctions really do not exist, but the word worship is actually used by the Roman Catholic Church regarding images. Number two, it is a ridiculous distinction between worship, venerate, and adore. I believe that people can see that, just common sense can see. It's ridiculous to try to draw a distinction between worship, venerate, and adore, but even if you want to hold out that there is a distinction, they still use the word worship. Number three, to promote the worship of images, the Roman Catholic Church has invented many different legends pertaining to the different images through the centuries. We'll notice a couple of those as we proceed. But I think probably the boldest move that they have ever made, and that is the Roman Catholic Church has expunged the second commandment from the decalogue, and that is, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. It is not simply a matter of numbering. I had so many Catholics write to me and say, after I mentioned this several weeks ago, they said, well, it's just a matter of how you number it. You're so dishonest. And let me tell you something. It's a matter of ignorance on your part, because the catechisms, and I read to you regarding the Baltimore Catechism, we'll read other ones also today. Catechisms have uniformly in the past, in the Roman Catholic catechisms, left off the second commandment of the decalogue. They don't simply renumber things. They try to keep 10 commandments by breaking the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, into two different commands. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And then number 10, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. And so they try to break it all up so we can still have 10. But they eliminate number 2. That is absolutely, to me, astounding. Not only that they do it, but that anyone would remain a Catholic and seek to defend it. That to me, that really bothers my mind, how people can be so far gone on that as to think that way. So let's talk about, number one, the worship of images, and then we'll talk about the efforts to justify these. So this is from Louis Ellis Dupin, who is a certified Roman Catholic historian of several centuries ago. And he writes, and he had the imprimatur of the Roman Church. He had the imprimatur of different popes. He was a man who was a learned man. He taught in Roman Catholic schools. And here's what he had to say. In the first 3 centuries, yea, in the beginning of the 4th, images were very scarce among Christians. Towards the end of the 4th century, they began, especially in the East, to make pictures and images, and they grew very common in the 5th. They represented in them the conflicts of the martyrs and the sacred histories to those who could not read. Those of the simpler sort, moved by these representations, could not forbear expressing the esteem, respect, and veneration they had for those represented therein. Thus was image worship established. That is Louis Ellis Dupin. Those are his words. Thus was image worship established. He uses the word worship. There's no difference between venerate, honor, esteem, respect, and worship. Dupin goes on. There is no doubt when paganism was the prevailing religion, but that it would have been dangerous for Christians to have images because they might have been given occasion of idolatry to those just reclaimed from it. And they might have given the pagans reason to object to Christians that they had and worshiped idols as they did. Therefore, it was fitting that there should be no images in the first ages, especially in the churches, and that there should be no worship paid them. End of quote. This is from Louis Ellis Dupin, his volume number 2. That's page 42. So what has he said? He said, well, the pagans would not understand. That's why he's trying to justify why it came up in the 4th and then the 5th century that we had image worship in the Roman Church, but why it was absent in the first several centuries because the pagans would not know the difference. They would think that they're worshiping images, idols. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it was. Leo number 2, in 730 AD, the Roman Emperor at Constantinople issued an edict against them. And this, of course, was the inauguration of the iconoclastic controversy. He ordered images removed out of all of the churches and sacred places, commanding them to be thrown into the fire and inflicting penalties upon those who ventured to obey them. That's interesting that he would want to even have an edict that would cast out the images because people would obey them. Constantine Copronymus, son of Leo number 2, completed the work of his father. Remember, this is the emperor, Roman emperor at Constantinople. He assembled 338 bishops at the Council of Constantinople in 754 AD. All of these bishops denounced the worship of images. This is the direct quote. Denounced the worship of images of Christ and the saints. They denounced it as a taint of heathenism, condemned by the scriptures and by such fathers as Chrysostom and Athanasius, and they forbade the use of images in private houses or churches. End of quote. Now, this is interesting. They forbade the worship of images. As if, I would like, this would be interesting. Here, all the Roman Catholics today would come in to defend and say, we don't worship images. What was he doing then? But here's the interesting thing also. His effort failed to carry the consciences of the public. They wanted to continue to do it. Even though he denounced the worship of images, they rebelled against Constantine's edict. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is really sordid history. But now we're going to see the effort of the Roman Catholic Church to justify the worship of images. And this, I'll tell you what, this is pretty subtle the way they try to do it. But it begins in the Second Nicene Council in 1787. So we just talked about in 1754, the Council at Constantinople, 338 bishops denounced the worship of images, but the people didn't want those condemned. So now we have the Second Nicene Council in 787, called by the Empress Irene. She was interested in calling it, and permanently settled the controversy in favor of worship of images. This is how exactly history reads. And the interesting thing you're going to see is they want to make a distinction between, you can worship the image of Mary and Christ, but not of angels. And they're going to make a distinction between, worshiping the figure itself or the substance behind it. Just for example, I have behind me on my left shoulder, this is Abraham, little bust of Abraham Lincoln, one of my heroes of history. Abraham Lincoln, George Washington on the other shoulder. And so they're going to say, the Roman Catholic Church is going to say, you can worship the image as long as you keep in mind that you worship the substance behind it, but don't worship the stone itself. Now that's how they're going to justify the worship of images. So let's see how they do it. This is This is directly from the Second Council of Nicaea, 787 AD. Quote, "We therefore honor and salute and honorably worship holy and venerable things." They worship things. That is to say, the image of the humanity of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, and of our Immaculate Lady, the Holy Mother of God, of whom he was pleased to be made flesh, and to save and turn us away from the impious love of idols. All right, that is confusing. We can worship the image of Christ, image of Mary, but we're going to turn away from the love of idols. Well, they have an idol of Christ and Mary. And the forms and representations of holy and incorporeal angels, for they also appeared to righteous as men, and in like manner the divine apostles, worthy of all praise, and of the inspired prophets, of the victorious martyrs, and of holy men. So they're making a distinction between the images worshipped of Christ and Mary and the images of men and angels. Not only so, but they're also making this distinction. Here's the statement from the council. "He who worships the figure worships the substance of that which is represented by it." All right, so they're saying if I worship the image here, it looks like I'm worshiping the substance. I'm worshiping the image of Abraham Lincoln. They're saying, well, I can actually worship the substance behind it, that is of Christ and Mary, but just as long as I don't worship the representation of it. In other words, they can bow down and worship the idol, but just as long as they're not worshiping the actual stone, they're actually worshiping the substance behind it. Now, this was Pope Adrian's doctrine. This was exactly his doctrine. This was accepted in Italy, denounced in France, however, because Charlemagne opposed these articles with great vehemence, and a work prepared for him by the famous Alcuin issued in his name, denouncing the adoration of images. He did not object to their presence in churches, but he said, quote, "The worship demanded for them by the Second Synod of Nicaea was an intolerable iniquity." The Second Council of Nicaea said you can worship the image. And they use the word worship. Now, when you go to the internet, you're going to have an internet AI overview. It's going to be very misleading. It's going to say, well, the iconoclastic controversy was settled in Nicaea in 1787. They venerated but did not worship the images. That is absolutely misleading. That's Catholic propaganda. Because the council itself said you could worship the image. Quote, "Nothing could be more untruthful or pernicious than the principle on which the bishops of the Deutero-Nicene Council justified their idolatry," wrote one. The council worships the substance of that which is represented by it. This is from Lab and Cossart, Paris, and that book was several centuries ago. So according to this, every heathen in the world could plead exemption from the charge of idol worship under the pretense that he was actually adoring the great God represented by the statue of Jupiter, by the statue of Artemis, by the statue of the shining sun, whatever it may be. Myriads have worshiped images in Christian churches without exercising any thought beyond the figure itself. Every single idol worshiper, heathen, in the world could justify their bowing down to images by that kind of reasoning put out by the Second Council of Nicaea. Charlemagne, who was Charles the Great, king of the Franks in 768 through 814, recognized the ridiculous distinction that Rome tried to make between veneration and worship of images, and it's the same ridiculous distinction that people such as the Knights of Columbus written to me and said, well, there's a difference between venerate and honor and worship. You know, people, that is a ridiculous distinction. So here's what Charlemagne wrote. The bishops of this synod order images to be adored. Whenever they find images spoken of in either scriptures or writings of the fathers, they conclude from them that they ought to be worshipped. That was how Charlemagne understood what was going on. Let us add, adore God alone, he said. Quote, continuing from Charlemagne, miracles performed by images are no proof that they should be adored. For then thorn bushes should be adored, because God spoke to Moses out of a burning bush. Fringes should be adored because Jesus Christ healed the woman who touched the fringe of his garment. And shadows too, because Peter's shadow wrought miracles. So we should worship shadows, right? But here's how the Council of Trent, this is the 16th century now, moving along the timeline, how they handled the issue. Now, I want you to listen for the word worship. It's in here, and this is how the Council of Trent puts it. Quote, moreover, the images of Christ, the Virgin Mother of God, and the other saints are to be had and retained particularly in temples, and that due honor and veneration are to be awarded them, not that any divinity or virtue is in them on account of which they are to be worshipped, or that anything is to be asked of them, or that confidence is to be reposed in images as was of old done by Gentiles who place hope in idols, but because the honor which is shown unto them is referred to the prototype which they represent. All right, let's break that down. We're worshiping actually the prototype which these idols represent, so they can bow down, honor and venerate and worship the idol, because actually they're worshiping the prototype or the reality behind the idol. Now that's what Trent said. Moreover, continuing the quote, it is not only lawful to have images in the church and to pay them honor and worship. This is the Council of Trent. So anytime a Roman Catholic wants to write and say, well, we honor, but we don't worship, you go to the Council of Trent and you look at what it says very plainly right here. The Creed of Pope Pius IV. He ended this Council of Trent. His dates were 1559 to 1565. Here's what he had to say. Quote, I must firmly assert that the images of Christ, of the Mother of God, and also of other saints ought to be had and retained, and that in due honor and veneration ought to be given to them. End of quote. So from the very start, it was not merely honor to the pictures or statues of the saints. It's not simply, oh, that's a great picture of Christ, or that's a great... No, nothing like that. Charlemagne was willing to render that. He was willing to allow that. It was venerating, adorating, burning incense, and worshiping the pictures and idols. So to promote this worship, legends were invented. For example, the Roman Catholic Church has invented many fabulous, fantastic legends. The statue of Jesus, for example, bleeds. In AD 561, a Jew stole a statue of Jesus, pierced it with darts, but the statue bled. The Catholics found the stolen statue by tracking the blood. They stoned the Jew for his impiety. Or the image of Jesus Speaks, AD 975. All of these can be found in Roman Catholic materials. The image of Jesus Speaks, the image of the Virgin Mary works prodigies, that's AD 1204. That is supposedly the image performed a great number of miracles. Then we have the image of the child Jesus called the Bambino, carved out of olive wood from Mount Olivet. Churches venerated it, and its miracles are famous all over Rome, especially at the birth of children, so teaches the Roman Catholic Church. A traveler in 1860 wrote this. This is an interesting quote. I want you to hear what he has to say. It is carried about, that is the Bambino, it is carried about in procession by a company of priests, attended by a band of soldiers with music, the people kneeling and esteeming it a great happiness to get a glimpse of it. It looks extremely like gross idolatry. End of quote. That's exactly what it is. He said it looks like gross idolatry. How about the image of Jesus in St. Salvador? The image can work great miracles, says the Roman Church. As a consequence, it enjoys the devout worship and the warm love of the whole people for miles around. That is from Gavin's Master Key to Popery, worshiping the image. How about the image of Our Lady of Pilar? It is said that the Apostle James, this is one of the traditions, and this is one of the legends, the stories that the Roman Catholic Church passes down. Like Grimm's fairy tales, we're told that Apostle James came with 7 converts to Saragossa, Spain. And as they were sleeping one night on the river Ebro, an army of angels awoke them at midnight, gave them an image of the Virgin Queen of Heaven on a pillar, by whose aid they should conquer the city for the Savior. They built a chapel for her. This image performs great and continuous prodigies and enjoys the rapturous admiration of worshiping hosts. Perpetual power to work miracles. Worshiping hosts. That's exactly how the Roman Catholic Church practices the image of Our Lady of Pilar. But I think probably the most outlandish and, to me, just most incredible, bold move that the Roman Church has done is to remove the second commandment from the decalogue, and that is, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Not to bow down to them, not to make any graven image. One of the most extraordinary steps. And I would say any community calling themselves Christian to erase the second commandment out of the decalogue is stunning to me. So here's the second commandment in whole. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. Now you'll note something interesting here. The word worship is not there, but obviously that's the idea. By implication, it's the same thing. But they're not to make idols and not to make graven images of anything. That's why the Jews didn't want even images such as the Roman eagle coming into the city of Jerusalem, which was violated by Pilate, but that's another story for another day. But the Roman Church, seeing this, has expunged the second commandment. And someone may want to write to me and say, that's a different way of numbering. No, I want you to listen to this for just a few moments, in all honesty and sincerity, and listen to Alphonsus Liguori. In his mission book, with the approval of Archbishop Hughes and John, Archbishop of New York in 1853, he lists the commandments as follows. Number 1, thou shalt not have strange gods before me, etc. That's right in the catechism. Number 2, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Number 3, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Number 4, honor the father and mother, so forth. Then they come down to 9 and 10. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, because they got to get 10 in there, so they break up 10, thou shalt not covet, into 2, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Number 10, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. That's Alphonsus Liguori in his mission book, erased number 2 command. The same prayer book has the same enumeration and omission, his prayer book. Here's another one called The Key of Heaven, a well-known Catholic prayer book recommended by Archbishop Hughes, makes the same change to the Decalogue. They omit number 2 command and split number 10 into 2 in order to make it come out to 10. Now here's something else interesting for those who are disposed to want to defend simply a different ordering of the numbers. Of the 29 catechisms in use in Rome, France, Belgium, Austria, Bavaria, Silesia, Poland, Ireland, England, Spain, Portugal, of the 29 catechisms, 27 of the 29, in 27 of them, the second commandment is totally omitted. It is not put into part number 1. It is not put into command number 1, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And by the way, not to make any graven images. They just leave etc. and leave it right there. No, they don't put it in there. Why? They know why. Everyone knows why. Because they worship images. They make images. They make carved images continually. And that's what Roman Catholicism is built upon. So they cut it out. The audacity to take God's word and destroy it that way, to me, mutilating God's word, is absolutely stunning. So, where Roman Catholic people have no Bible, you know they're totally ignorant of this commandment for the most part. I want you to listen to this story, and with this we'll end. One missionary in Malta, a Roman Catholic teacher, an Italian, named Mr. Temple, had a visitor. He's in Malta now, a Roman Catholic priest. He's the teacher. Mr. Temple had a visitor. The visitor noted the second commandment was removed from the decalogue in the catechism. So the visiting missionary showed him the second commandment in the Latin Vulgate, that is Martin's translation, or rather Martini's translation, which was authorized by the Pope. And Mr. Temple, the Roman Catholic teacher, read it. He said, and here's his quote, "I have lived 50 years. I have been publicly educated in Italy, but till this hour, I never knew that such a command was written in the pages of the Bible." End of quote. How do you like that? You know, I don't. I think people who are in the Roman Catholic faith need to make an examination of their own heart. And I appeal to you to look at the idolatry that is rampant in the Roman Church. Rampant. You also might notice the Baltimore Catechism. I read that in the last program. The Baltimore Catechism, I think it's 1854 or so, completely omits the second commandment. That is taking liberties with God's holy word, not simply changing a word or two, but erasing the second command out of the decalogue. Why did they do it? Because they violate it every single day. So I know the thousands of people are gathering at the Vatican in memory of Pope Francis. I'm very sorry. I don't have any ill feelings toward him, but the people are simply misled. And people need to look at the idolatry in the Roman Church. It's an apostate church. Come to the truth of the New Testament alone. We'll talk more in the next podcast.